This is Link to the Cast, your weekly dose of video games and nerd culture ephemera, available everywhere good podcasts are sold. I am this week's party host. I am the platforming prodigy. I am Mark Robinson. With me, as always, he is the Denzel Dumfries of the podcasting world. He is Jack Lazel. Jack, how are you?
I'm alright, mate. You know, just bombing down the old podcast wing. I feel like fine juniper berries is what I smell of right now, and that's a good place to be.
That is. I go to Lush for some of my kind of like showers and bath soaps and stuff like that. And they have a particular like ocean lemon scented soap that is exceptional.
Yeah, I tell you what, I bet our guest on the show didn't think this was how the podcast was going to start this week.
No, he has run off Dave Ryan. Once again, he is Cork's favourite son. Garrett, what do you have to say for yourself?
I'm glad to be invited back so that I can talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And that is, Mark, why you should watch the Fast and Furious movies.
Yes!
Oh, Jesus, are we doing that? Oh, God.
Your utter resistance to them last week was frankly quite upsetting. So when you invited me on, I was like, well, we have to continue to bully him from every angle possible.
You can continue to do that, and I will continue to tell you to go fuck yourself.
The thing is, though, mate, I know for a fact, like, the one that I saw the other day, which we talk about a bit later, I was like, you know what? If I was sat in a cinema with you watching this, we would have been laughing and hooting and hollering. You know, I sat next to you for Hot Fuzz, right? And to me, that's still one of my favourite sort of collaborative cinema experiences of just me, you, and our friend Matt Niner just falling about like an absolute bunch of clowns in Harlow watching that movie.
I'm trying to remember who I saw Tokyo Drift with, because it's the only Fast and Furious film I've seen, which obviously is probably like the worst one as far as I'm aware. So I can hear it, you know, around.
It's in the bottom half.
Yeah.
But, you know, pretty much everybody in that movie wasn't in most of the rest of the series until this last one, when they came in for like a sort of 5-minute cameo.
What a selling point that is.
Yeah.
The real spiritual successor to Tokyo Drift, the one you have to see.
Exactly. Yeah, you really. That's why you should go see F9. Really, at the end.
Really, just for the completion's sake. You've only now seen half of these people's stories. You got to see the conclusion.
Before this goes on a wild Fast and Furious tangent, Garrett, just how are you?
I'm doing fine. Football's on all the time. I have it on next to me, which is wonderful.
Yes. Spain versus Switzerland.
It's very, very upsetting the days when there is no football during an international tournament. It's like, what am I meant to do with my life at the moment?
Yeah.
You get to that 2 p.m. football slot and you're like, why is there no Ukraine versus North Macedonia? This is not acceptable.
Even the day during the group stages where there was that one day where there wasn't a 2 p.m. game.
Unacceptable.
I was like, what am I supposed to do? Just sit here and do other things? Or work?
Yeah. Definitely not that. I mean... Let's face it. But yeah, I was out for a walk yesterday and I was like, this is odd. I'm normally watching football at this time. It made me remember my life before there was the tournament, and I don't think I liked it, Mark. I
would be perfect. Everyone's talking about that it's unacceptable that UEFA expanded this to 26 teams. I say fuck it. Go to like 64 teams, right? Let's make this a whole summer of football.
We don't have enough Europe. It'd have to be like Eurovision where we start slinging invites out
just bring in
to
Australia. Who cares?
Yeah, I think there's 55 countries in Europe, I would say. So you wanted 64 teams. So yeah, let's bring in like 9 countries. Australia get the vote.
We're splitting up a couple of countries every few years anyway, so I'm sure we'll get there soon enough.
I want to put New Zealand in just because I want to see Chris Wood absolutely shithouse, I don't know, Chiellini or something like that. I would really enjoy that. What about you, Garrett? Who are you going to invite from the ROW rest of the world into Euro 2024, which has now got 64 teams in it?
Well, knowing Ireland, we still wouldn't qualify.
Even though I've included every country in Europe, you would still find a way to not qualify.
We'd just be like, we kicked you out just because we just didn't like the look of you.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I'll tell you what, I'll give Ireland the first team out of the hat when I draw it, even though everyone gets drawn.
Just to make us feel better about ourselves. Look!
Exactly.
It's and you act surprised as well. It's like you take it as like, it's Ireland. Oh,
yep. And then just cut to us like a really terrible version of Irish fans celebrating from like say Robbie Keane's goal from 2002, and I'm like, look how happy they are, you know, ignoring all of the obvious signs that it's actually 20 years later.
Oh, we were watching that in primary school at the time. Like literally small TV in the classroom in primary school in what I think was 4th class. Yeah.
Do you guys miss when like we were at school and then sometimes they'd just crack out, like the TV that's on the weird sort of trellis table with wheels, and then just like you get to watch a film or like, I don't know, watch something. I certainly remember watching really weirdly Dogma in RE. I don't know if you remember this, Mark. But our
look, it's topical, I think it fits.
I know, but like I kind of miss those days because I don't ever watch TVs that are on little wheelie tables anymore, really.
I think you forget as well that teachers are human. Like when you're a student, you don't think as a teacher as like just a human being. That you see them as a teacher because you're 12 years old, and that's just that's what they are. So you have to imagine that, and one of our best friends is a teacher, but you have to imagine they have those days where they're like, you know what, I really don't give a shit today. I am going to put on the TV and just sack it off.
Yeah, that'd be me every day, to be honest.
As someone who has spent 6 months in a classroom training to be a teacher with teenagers, yeah, that happens all the time.
How's that going for you?
Well, I'm not doing it anymore, so that probably tells you.
Yeah, but look, at the end of the day, not everybody can be managing their Impact Twitter account with such aplomb. Like,
That's
you
true.
found your calling in life.
And like, it's weird that my school dreams have been replaced with teaching dreams. I don't have dreams of being in school anymore. I have dreams of teaching nightmare children who ruin my life.
Oh, mate. Deary me.
That's just some level of self-loathing you need to work through.
Yeah, I think you made the right swerve then. I think the working from home and not being around anyone else kind of thing is for you, definitely.
So, all right, you started talking a little bit there about Fast and the Furious, so we might as well just get this fucking thing over and done with. Jack, you saw it. Garrett, have you seen it?
Yes, of course.
Okay, all right, I'll give you 5 minutes. Go.
Okay. Garrett, I'm going to ask you for your thoughts first because I know that I'm going to be extensively talking about this in the very near future on the old Fast and the Furious on the Days of Thunder feed. So what have you got to say for F9?
It is a stupid, illogical, ridiculous film, and it's the best.
Yeah, it is.
Like, not to get into spoilers, or a very slight spoiler, but there's a scene where John Cena is ziplining through Edinburgh. And he's just ziplining between buildings and buildings and buildings, and Vin Diesel chases him through the streets, somehow climbs to the top of one of these buildings, and intercepts John Cena mid-zipline to crash him through a window. And I literally started howling laughing.
It was a proper like Edge tackling Jeff Hardy for the for the belts kind of tackle as well, wasn't it? Like right out of midair.
And when you think about it for like a half second, you're just like, how'd he get up there? How'd he catch up with the zip line? He was entirely on foot the entire time. But thinking about these films for a half second is not what they want you to do.
Absolutely not. Like, for instance, like when the first 10 minutes they're driving across a live minefield.
A literal minefield.
Yep. And they're like, who is it? I can't remember if it is. No, it's not. It's Natalie Emmanuel, isn't it? And they're like, she's like, oh, don't worry. If you drive it's like 82 miles an hour or something, then the mines won't blow up the car. We'll get past it.
Yeah, it's like if you drive so fast through a speed camera, it won't go off. The logic applies.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the speed cameras don't explode your car. So, yeah. My favourite part of that, though, was Tyrese just going, Minas? What is Minas? Like, there's like one letter difference between Mines and Minas. And I think the gimmick of Tyrese's IQ draining slowly down every single movie, being stepped down like 10 points, is an absolute winner. Honestly, if they're going to do a double part, Mark, it's going to be like an Infinity War Endgame end for the Fast franchise. Mark's got his head in his hands.
Yeah, it's not 10 and 11, Mark. It's 10 part 1 and part 2. It's important to note.
Exactly.
Who do I have to blame for this first? I want to say the Deathly Hallows deciding to split that last book up. Is that who I have to blame for doing this kind of fucking thing?
It's either Harry Potter or Hunger Games. Who did it first?
I want to say Potter did it.
I think it would have been Potter. But also the Hunger Games is only like 4 films, maybe 5.
It's 4 films, all 3 books. The last one was broken into 2.
Okay,
Didn't they do? They did 2 for Twilight as well.
Yes, they did 2 for Twilight as well.
I know, but these are all books. Like these all have.
By the way, I just want to say, having never seen the Twilight films before, and I came in a few weeks ago, and Maria was watching like the end of the last one. I did not know that Michael Sheen was in it as like the big bad vampire. And that threw me off, may I just say. Somewhat fierce.
Yeah, they must have really backed a truck of money up to his house for him to do that shit. I have no idea why. But, yeah, I think the ultimate piss-takery so far has been splitting The Hobbit into 3 movies. Like, that was unnecessary. You know, if you have, like, just one movie...
Wait, did Peter Jackson do the Hobbit films? Or doing the... I don't know what is that?
Yeah, I think he did, yeah.
Okay, well,
yeah,
Peter Jackson and
did.
Unnecessary are 2, you know, things that go pretty hand in hand.
They were originally meant to be Guillermo del Toro, but he pulled out. And then Peter Jackson was like, let's make him... It was meant to be 2 under del Toro. And Peter Jackson was like, it should be 3, I guess. Though he has openly admitted, because he jumped on the project very late after del Toro dropped out, he's admitted, like, I had no idea what I was doing. I was winging it the entire time.
I tell you what, I would love to have seen Guillermo del Toro's nightmarish version of The Hobbit. Like, how much scarier, like, would Smeagol have been in The Hobbit? He just would have been terrifying, like even scarier than in The Lord of the Rings, I would imagine. But yeah, anyway, obviously naturally segueing from The Hobbit into Fast and the Furious, as always, with the tangents. But about all the stuff that happened, Garrett, like, I just think, like, you know, there's like, is it Cinema Sins who, like, the guys that, like, point out all of the shit in movies that doesn't go right, and it kind of annoys me because it's just kind of like, you know, it's tough to make films, and, you know, you're not in there for like 100% levels of accuracy or whatever, but I feel like this movie might be like a real divining rod for whether people are on board with the absolute craziness or not. This. Because you either, like us, think it's absurd genius and just switch your brain off and don't think about every scene how they should be dead like 50 times over by this point, or you sit there and you're absolutely furious about everything that's happening. What do you reckon?
You see, I'm generally, no matter what the film, I don't use my brain watching movies. Which is like, there are people who are like, you know, they're picking stuff apart as the Swiss just scored. But
Yep.
But people pick apart movies in a way that, like, oh, you know, that didn't make sense or this didn't make sense. And I'm just like, you know what? Take me on your journey. And if you contradict something you told me, I'll have a problem. But if something makes no natural sense in the real world, I don't care. It's fiction. Do whatever you want.
Do you think that is, like, everyone's a critic these days, and, you know, there's so much stuff out there in terms of, like, not just reviewing a film saying it's good or bad, but, you know, you can go on YouTube and you can find, like, a deep dive on any fucking film and talks about, you know, like, here is a metaphor for something in this film that you're like, well, where the fuck did that come from? So, like, maybe like subconsciously to some degree, you know, you're kind of bombarded with, like, hey, really pay attention to these films and really try and, like, understand. And I mean, you're not going to get that in a Fast and the Furious.
You don't
film.
get it in Final Fantasy either, to be fair.
Definitely
You
not
wouldn't be getting it in a Final
well.
Fantasy movie. Oh my god.
Definitely not getting a Final Fantasy movie. So I feel like that plays a little part in it. Like, even for me, between that and more specifically with me, because I've been watching a lot of the Corridor Crew, who do really excellent videos about CGI and post-production in films. And after I started watching those, like, everything I watch now, I'm seeing more like, okay, well, obviously there's green screen and there's CGI there, and, you know, that doesn't look as good as it could do. And that is kind of my thing that drives my partner insane, because I'm like, yeah, green screen. She's like, shut the fuck up, Mark, let me just enjoy it. So I don't know, I feel like that kind of may play a little part in it as well.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think for a while when I was doing music production, Mark, as well, it did kind of ruin music for me for a while.
Yeah.
Where I was just hearing, like, oh man, maybe that snare is a bit loud, or this, that, and the other, and it trains your brain away from it. So I think, like, sometimes Garrett's approach is way better. Like, switch your brain off, unless it's like a Christopher Nolan movie and you really need to fucking pay attention to everything that's happening, otherwise you're just done. Yeah, it's better to just sort of enjoy the whole of something rather than look at the constituent parts sometimes, I guess. But yeah, Mark, we both saw the same movie as well.
Yeah, speaking of dumb movies, Hitman's Bodyguard's Wife is a very, very dumb fucking film.
It is.
That I tend to go into films, I kind of, like Mark Mode, have the sort of 5 laughs and I'm enjoying myself scale, and I did get 5 laughs out of this. I wouldn't say this was a particularly good film. I don't think the original was a particularly good film, but I did come out of it, and I think everything is skewed these days where you have the Cineworld pass, so you never feel like you're not getting your money's worth because you didn't pay for it to some degree. But I think even if I had paid 15 quid or whatever the price is for an adult ticket these days, I wouldn't have felt like I'd completely wasted my time. But, don't go into this expecting any level of highbrow acting, storytelling, even comedy. But I got my chuckles out of this. I kind of feel like maybe this is sacrilegious to say, but, the air quotes Samuel L. Jackson performance has become a little bit of a caricature to the point where I'm kind of tired of it. I will always get some enjoyment out of Samuel Jackson on the screen, being Samuel Jackson, swearing, having a grand old time. But he was doing that in 1993 with Die Hard with a Vengeance, which I fucking love it when he's doing in that film. But I don't know, in 2021, it seems lazy to me. Maybe I'm way off there, but it seems a bit lazy at this point.
I mean, he's taken that movie way more seriously than he's taken this movie. Pretty much everyone in this movie, I feel like, was told, just go do all the stuff that you do. They said, Ryan Reynolds, you just be Ryan Reynolds. Samuel Jackson, you just be
Ryan
Samuel
Reynolds is being Ryan Reynolds. Salma Hayek is being Salma Hayek.
Yeah, but slightly more with the volume turned up. It's basically
everyone's turned up to 11.
It's like they're doing the pro wrestling version of themselves.
To a certain degree, yes. I will say my biggest laughs came with anything involving Morgan Freeman, because it was basically take this, and no spoilers, not that anyone's going to fuck about this, but basically, okay, take this particular character arc, and it's fine, whatever, but you immediately apply Morgan Freeman to it, and it actually becomes very funny because it's Morgan Freeman doing this role.
Yeah. Agreed. I just was not expecting him to show up in this. I mean, I'm gonna call it piece of shit movie, but I don't. I don't hate the movie. I enjoy the movie, but it is a piece of shit at the same time, right?
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment.
Have you seen it, Garrett?
No. It has a dumb name.
Yeah. Did you see the first one?
Yes.
There's a first one?
Yeah. So there's a Hitman. The Hitman's Bodyguard, right? Which is Samuel Jackson's a hitman, Ryan Reynolds is his bodyguard. There you go. So this is more of a Salma Hayek movie as Hitman's bodyguard's wife. Yeah. So hopefully if they do another one, it will be like some weird relation of hers. And it'll be like
Hitman's bodyguard's wife's dog or something.
Yeah, Hitman's
the John Wick film all of a sudden.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bit of wick to it. The gore in this movie, by the way, there's a lot of gore, isn't there?
I have to say that Ryan Reynolds probably should be dead on about 3 separate occasions in this film, mainly involving vehicular assault. He gets wrecked on a number of occasions, and
I mean, it's nothing compared to what Big Vin goes through in F9, but yeah.
Okay.
Or Tyrese is invincible. He said it in the film.
Yeah, exactly.
God, alright, what else we got on this? Nobody. I've been wanting to see this. I'll get around to it at some point. Jack, what is Nobody? Is it any good?
It's funny you should mention John Wick. So this shit absolutely slaps. It's Bob Odenkirk, who is a man that can do no wrong in my eyes. I think he's fantastic in pretty much everything that he turns his hand to. He's very good at drama. He's very good at comedy, whether it's like sketch or just, like sitcom or movies. Like he can do all that shit. Can he do action? Yes, he can. So like the basic premise is this guy, we don't know a lot about him, but we see him at the start of the movie, like, kind of bad and bloody, and, he has a small cat, and they ask him who he is, and he says nobody. And the reason he's saying that is because you find out very early in the film that he was one of the CIA's finisher/fixer type people who they would send in to like clean up situations, i.e. if there was a bunch of bad guys that they needed to sort out, they would do it. But he's kind of switched up his life now. He hasn't done it for a long time. He lives in a sort of suburbia type situation. And the way the movie starts off, it has a very sort of Michael Douglas and Falling Down type vibe to it, where you're just seeing day-to-day stuff over and over again, and it's seeming really boring for him. And then about 10 minutes into the movie, somebody tries to burgle his house. and his son tries to fight off the burglars. He has a clear shot at one of the burglars. He doesn't take the shot, and his son kind of loses respect for him. And then this sets off a sequence of events, Mark, that ultimately ends up with him facing off with an extremely high up crime boss in the town and just murdering hundreds and thousands of people. Like, the degree of murder in this movie is John Wick level. Like, it starts off with like a really cool, like, tight fight scene on a bus between him and like 5-6 people, and then by the end of the movie we're seeing sniper rifles, shotguns, like grenades, explosions, the whole 9 yards.
I mean, what you're explaining to me sounds very much like John Wick. Can you go into this and separate the two films enough to enjoy it on its own merits?
I can. I don't know, some people might not be able to, but I can, because it's a very different kind of performance from Bob Odenkirk, and it's a bit more kind of gritty than John Wick. Like, some of the fight scenes are a bit more sort of intense and kind of close up and personal than John Wick.
John has a knife fight in a museum.
Yeah, but none of those. But see,
and kills a man with a book.
Yeah, they're all like the book scene is probably the closest to the bus scene in this movie.
Okay.
There's a fight on a bus in this movie, which is probably one of my favorite like fight scenes I've ever seen in anything. And it's one of those ones where you can proper hear the crunch of like people's bones breaking and like faces being smashed into like things. And yeah,
is it that kind of like the Mortal Kombat X-ray sort of thing, or like you're not seeing anything but you can just hear the bone crunching and stuff?
Oh no, you're kind of seeing stuff happen. Like,
okay.
It's pretty graphic. But yeah, it's just one of those films that the pace is perfect. It builds gradually and nicely, and the tension's really good, and it's like 90 minutes long as well. Like,
perfect.
I love that 90-minute film that just slaps for 90 minutes. Like, I guess some people in John Wick, because they tend to be a bit longer, like maybe they get a bit tired of the murder. Not me personally. I think they're all fucking quality.
I think this, I may be wrong, like just off the top of my head, but I feel like my issue with just 2 and 3 is they're longer than 1, and like 1 is kind of is a perfect little package, where 2 and 3 is a little bit excessive. Like Portal 2 is great, but what makes the original Portal work is it's just this perfect kind of 2-hour package.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying on that. Yeah. But yeah, if you kind of like action movies, you like John Wick, you like Bob Odenkirk, all of these things, you should definitely watch it. And it has like a fantastic, unexpected turn of the RZA from Wu-Tang Clan. He turns up towards the end and happens to be like a good friend of Bob Odenkirk, and we haven't seen him all the way through the movie. He's just been talking to him on a radio basically, and he turns up with some guns, and absolutely like some of the things that involve the RZA, like some of the action things are just so awesome. And it just made me want to see like a team up movie, like a full team up movie between Bob Odenkirk and RZA. So yeah, this thing is very good, and I recommend that. You might not, again, like Mark, I have a Cineworld card, so I'm not paying full price for movies, so I mean it might be worth waiting for some people, but it's one of those ones where if you throw it on like an Amazon or a Netflix or something, you ain't going to be disappointed if you like action. So yeah, high recommend from me.
Garrett, you're keeping it topical, or you're keeping it current. I see 12 Monkeys on the production notes.
So I talked about Fringe last time where I was on the show, and I was like, put it out on Twitter. It's like, I want another like decent sci-fi show. So I'm like, somebody name me a decent underrated TV sci-fi show, because I'm watching the show, not the movie it's based on, which I haven't seen. Okay. But and then Andrew Rich of the Music of the Mat podcast is like 12 Monkeys, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll go for 12 Monkeys, because it had
I didn't even know this was a TV show.
I didn't know there was a TV show. I just thought it was a movie, and it was a pretty good movie, but I haven't seen it for a long time.
Yeah, they made a 4-season TV show based on it.
Holy shit!
But yeah,
how have I not heard of this?
I've never heard of the movie, so I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll go in and watch it. And then within the first episode, it's like, oh, thanks, Andrew. Thank you for the escapism of a world ravaged by a pandemic and people traveling back in time to stop it. Thanks. That's really what I'm in the mood for right now. As I say, I've now currently a few episodes into season 2. It's a weird show in that I'm not invested particularly in the characters. I'm not even particularly invested in like the minute-to-minute story beats, but I'm invested overall in like the overall pandemic story part of it and the time travel bit. And I'm like, logically, when I think about that, I'm like, well, I could just read the Wikipedia page to find out what happened, but my brain doesn't work that way. It's like, fine, I'll just suffer through it. Yeah, it's a decent little show. I'm enjoying it. It's obviously, if you want to escape from the pandemic world we live in, not the thing for you right now on any level. But yeah, it's because I'm a sucker for any kind of like near future sci-fi, and it's right up my alley in that regard.
I'm trying to remember the plot to 12 Monkeys. Like, they go back in time to what, like, before the pandemic starts, like, deal with the pandemic, or
90s. I think it's like 2035, I want to say, the original one, and then they go back to like the 90s to try and stop it. Bruce Willis does a lot of shouting. Is my main recollection of that movie.
It's Willis and Brad Pitt, I want to say.
Yeah, Brad Pitt's in it as well.
Yeah.
I really can't remember too much.
I'm going to guess neither of those two appear in the TV series.
Not yet, anyway. I hope so. Really, they're really digging deep for IP to make into shows, aren't they?
Did we get Chris Plummer? Because that would have been filmed probably before he passed away.
Yeah, because I think it ended in like 2015 or something. It obviously wouldn't. I'd imagine they would have cancelled it if they actually ran into the actual pandemic. It's like, this show isn't about a pandemic anymore, we swear.
If we're pulling Bruce Willis IP for TV shows, can we not get a Fifth Element TV show, please?
It just would be great, wouldn't it? Like,
or at least a sequel.
Yeah, I don't know about a sequel because I don't know, but Bruce Willis is kind of like a bit of a douche these days.
I know, but you could probably do like a Blade Runner sequel sort of thing where you give it to, you imagine Ryan Gosling in The Fifth Element.
All right, but give it 10 years, right? I give it 10 years until Bruce Willis is even more wizened than he is now, and he has to help some young guy through the Fifth Element type situation. That would be pretty cool.
Okay.
But like the setting for Fifth Element, you would think it would lend great to, like modern cinema or like a video game. Like it would make a really cool Fifth Element video game, I think.
Actually, I might be mistaken, but I feel like the guy that directed Fifth Element is the same guy that directed the Blade Runner sequel. I might be well off there, but I feel like that's the case. Anyway, this is way off topic. The last thing we got on here, so we've been talking about Loki for the last couple of weeks. Obviously, we've had episode 4 now. First of all, I'll spin it over to you, Garrett, for your kind of hot takes overall about what you think. We, over the last couple of weeks, have kind of been a bit mild on it. It's had its moments, but there are certain issues that we have. I'd be curious to get your takes up to this point.
I feel good about Jack for once because the first time I came on was right after the WandaVision finale, which is a show I liked, but the finale sucked. But the show was actually quite good. But still, I was on right after the bad episode, so I only talked about how bad it was. And then the second time I was on it, I think it was right either halfway through Winter Soldier or toward the end of it. Terrible show. I hate it. Dreadful, dreadful piece of television. Loki, very good. I like Loki a lot. I think, like, it's a Doctor Who show. It's basically just Doctor Who with Marvel characters. And the relationship between Loki and Sylvie is basically like a doctor and a master relationship, except with more sexy eyes. But actually, the Peter Capaldi and, is it Michelle Gomez? Is that the name of the person who played Peter Capaldi's master?
I'm not a Doctor Who person, so I have no idea.
I'm not sure. I think the only time I ever really watched a lot of Doctor Who was when David Tennant was in it. And I'm a big Billie Piper fan, so when she was in the show, I enjoyed that quite a lot.
Yeah, but the Loki and Sylvie relationship reminds me a lot of like Peter Capaldi's relationship with his master, and yeah, it's a good show. I like it a lot. I think the minute to minute beats are a lot more enjoyable than a lot of the other shows, mostly because I think they get the dialogue a lot better. I think was my big problem with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It felt like it was written by a bot that like churned all the Marvel scripts out and then spat this thing out that's like, this is what Marvel movies sound like. Now it's a TV show. As opposed to this, where I think the banter works better. I think the character interactions work better. Owen Wilson is just like the most likable man on earth. So it's like impossible not to at least be like, you know what? Wow. Which I don't think he does a wow in the show, which is actually a little upsetting. But
no, he said he's not doing one, which in my head, I'm like, right, wait till the finale.
This is a show about infinite multiverses. If you can't find me one where Owen Wilson says, wow, cancel the show.
Yeah. I'd love to see Mobius turn up behind the actual actor, Owen Wilson, at some point. That would be pretty cool. Because, if there's infinite possible timelines, then surely in another timeline, Mobius is the actor, Owen Wilson.
Well, if you think about it, are we getting into spoilers? Are we okay with spoilers?
I mean, yeah.
Well, we say spoiler alert now.
We can put spoiler tag on this, yeah.
Yeah, spoilers. So, the big thing is that Mobius may have actually lived on Earth, that he was an actual person. So maybe he was Owen Wilson.
That is entirely possible. Owen Wilson strikes me as a man who would enjoy jet skiing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I
think that's my biggest issue with the third episode, when I think back to it, is the fact there's no Owen Wilson in it, among other things. I think my main issue at this point, and I think it's just because we've done, so many Marvel films and TV shows, but it is... I'm a little bit tired of the good guys are the bad guys, and the bad guys are the good guys. It's a very... I feel it's been kind of done to death as a plot device, and it's not like you can't see it coming from a million fucking miles away. I think the execution is fine, and I like the kind of way that Mobius kind of has the reveal, and he has that kind of little bit when he drags Loki out of his prison cell, which, by the way, that kind of time loop thing that Loki is in is very funny, and I like that.
God, it seems like... you know what? It reminded me of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, a.k.a. Bill and Ted Go to Hell, where, there's loads of, different chambers where you can, relive a terrifying or horrible moment from your life if you go into them over and over again. So I don't know if they would credit Bill and Ted as to giving them the idea for this, but it felt very much like that, if you've seen that movie.
And I will say, for the one thing that I quite like about these MCU TV shows is you are just kind of pulling either cameos or characters out of the MCU films that you might not expect. You had it with WandaVision, with Kat Dennings, and I can't even think about the Winter and Falcon Soldier. Oh, you had
Don Cheadle.
Yeah, Don Cheadle was in the start.
Don Cheadle, yeah, and fucking the UFC guy whose name I always forget, Pierre.
George and a lot of Black Panther characters
Batok
as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, actually they were as well. So that's one of the things that I'm actually liking about the TV show, is it is kind of pulling different parts of the MCU.
Spoiler alert, I popped huge for Richard E. Grant and can't believe he hasn't played Tom Hiddleston's dad in more things, because he really does look like a sort of weather-beaten version of Tom Hiddleston.
I will say this for Loki, kind of similar to WandaVision in terms of doing that cliffhanger for the next episode. Loki is doing a very good job of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I'm the high man maybe in the world on the third episode. I really, really liked the third episode, and this took it to another level for me.
I think the third episode was great as well. It's an important episode. You need to sit with these characters for an episode to care about them. Otherwise, it has the Falcon and the Winter Soldier problem, where it's you're introduced to this other Captain America, and you spend 10 minutes with him on total screen time before he does the big heel turn. So,
yeah. I think the big problem with the new Captain America, and it's the problem with a lot of this type of stuff with the MCU, where so much of it is just about setup to get to whatever is going to be the big thing for them in the future, and the setup is either it's not enough or it's too much, and then usually a lot of times it's just not enough, because it's they'll have their big thing in the future, whether it's a TV show or a film, where they'll be the kind of main crux. And I think that's just a problem when you have this extended universe, that you run into that situation a lot.
And so many characters to serve as well, which is
yeah.
And the more you put into the show, the more characters you draw from other places, the more you have to serve them, and the less a lot of them will end up being served, which I think this is a relatively lean show in that regard. There's not a ton of regular recurring characters that they have to give screen time to, which is why they can sit with two of them for a full 50 minutes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's true.
I think the scale of this one is, it makes it a lot easier. I feel like Falcon and Winter Soldier, the main issue with that is that you were doing a lot of mental gymnastics for them. You were trying to infer your own motivations for the characters. You were trying to figure out how they relate to each other. You were trying to figure out whether or not this person would do a heel turn or not, based on the small snippets. And if you know enough about comics lore and understand the people, then you see the situations coming, you kind of figure out roughly where they're going, but you have all of that grounding and understanding why they are doing what they're doing and what sort of person they are. Whereas watching that show and not knowing any of that information must be pretty miserable, I would say, because you don't get enough of it on screen. I really enjoyed a lot of it for that reason. I think, because I had all those preconceived notions in my head, and they kind of went in that direction. But yeah, Loki is better. It's quite a lot better, in fact, I would say. And this fourth episode, they just jam-packed with WTF moments and just really went balls to the wall. And seeing a fucking Richard E. Grant, like a small child, and a crocodile version of Loki at the end of this makes me think that the next episode is going to be absolutely mental and a trip to Wacky Town. So bring that on, is what I say.
Do we get an animated version of Loki? There's surely one, right?
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah.
We need an animated one. We need a pig version of him.
Yes.
Yep.
What else am I missing? There was like a robot as well from the Spider.
Yep, film. That was controlled by a small Japanese girl. Yeah,
that was the one. Yeah. All right, let's move on to what we've been playing. We've got a few things on the list this week. So I think I want to start with the big one, which we started last week, which Jack had been playing, and now I've had a chance to play it. Garrett, actually, have you picked up Mario Golf? Have you played any of this? Are you interested in the new Mario Golf at all?
I played like 2 hours of it, and my core conclusion is that speed golf sucks.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, yes, that would be not even a hot take. It is just the correct take.
Yes.
Speed golf is fucking atrocious.
It's like, what if we took golf, which is inherently a slow and boring sport, and made it slower and more boring?
Exactly. Like I said on the show last week, I play virtual golf, so I can hit a ball 300 yards, and I don't have to walk 300 yards to take my next shot. Just take me to the ball, and then I'll hit the next ball. Like, that's what I want to do in a golf game. Anyway,
so I do wonder, like, have either of you played it multiplayer?
No.
Yes.
I can imagine it's fun in multiplayer, but I'm not playing it to play it in multiplayer.
Yeah,
so
same. But I was thinking, like, because it's boring, and it just has no bearing on the game. You can slow the other players down, the NPC players, from getting to their ball, but they'll always get to their shots, and they won't hit their shots any better or worse because of anything you did while you're doing the speed golf running stuff. So I was thinking, like, maybe it's more entertaining in multiplayer when you're messing with your friends and ruining their shots, but yeah.
The thing, as I was playing through the speed golf, is that if they wanted to do it where, hey, like between shots, this becomes, I'm not going to say like a Breath of the Wild game where you're doing some big fucking adventure and exploration.
See that mountain, you can go there and hit your golf ball off it.
Do you know what? If they wanted to do a little bit of that and you go at your own pace and it just gets a little bit of exploration in there, but with none of the, hey, you have to be there in 2 minutes to hit your next shot, I think I would be fine with that. But what they did is I love Mario Party games, but I will admit that basically all Mario Party games are just very, diluted, bad versions of other good games, whether it be like karting games or platforming games. Like if you play any of the platforming sections in a Mario Party game, and you compare them against like an actual Mario game, they're atrocious, but it's Mario Party, you go with it. And it just kind of feels like if they took Breath of the Wild with the, not even climbing, but just kind of exploration, air quotes, with the stamina depletion mechanic.
I hate the stamina so much.
And then put that into like a Mario Party game, and then put that into a Mario Golf game, that is what you have. And it's really fucking bad. And after about an hour of playing the second course, and also I hate the fact that it does you can do these courses in any direction or in any kind of order that you want. No, I don't want to do that. Just give me fucking 18 holes that I do one after the other. After about an hour of trying to do that second course, I put it down and I've not picked it up since, and I'm trading this thing in at the weekend because I do not like it.
Yeah, I was talking about the fire power gem thing last week. So we finished recording, I got it, and then I had a big battle against a big snowman, and I beat the big snowman, and that was the end of the adventure mode.
Nice.
And I was like, so that was about 5 hours, I think, 5-6 hours, and that sucks. And then I was like, okay, what else is there to do? Turns out, nothing. Literally, if you go back into the story mode, you can carry on working on your me if you want, and you can carry on doing the tasks over and over again until you kind of level yourself up to the top. But there's no point really in doing that. There's no win to it, and you can get a little bit more stats on the characters if you get a certain amount of coins from playing through the courses. which if you really want to, I think it's like an extra 30 yards worth of distance or something you can get, which is like, meh, whatever. But other than that, there's literally nothing to do. It is literally, it's like popcorn, this game, in that, you know, something looks big, but it's incredibly light, and there's really nothing of any substance to it. But you shovel it into your mouth for a while, and then you don't even feel fulfilled afterwards. You like the taste as it's going in, but then once it's finished, you're like, I'm still hungry. This is Mario Golf for me. It's, yeah. I mean, I could talk about how they don't give you the option to get your own accuracy on the swing meter like they do in the other games with like the 3-click version of getting the ball. So like, you know, unless you build up your accuracy stat, you've got no control really over whether you shank a ball or whether you hit it straight. It's just in the lap of the gods, which I find disappointing. Or just the general having to like build up stamina and stuff so I can run around a golf course and get to my ball, when really, it, like Garrett said, there's no bearing on it. Like, I'm still, you know, if I hit it 200 odd yards and then go and get my next shot or whatever, I'm still might finish the hole like way slower, but with a better strokes gained thing than I would do than the CPU characters. There's no challenge in the story mode. Like, I played all the way through it. I didn't have to redo any challenges. And yeah, XC Golf is the worst shit ever, like Mark said, the Breath of the Wild type thing. It's just so damn disappointing, this. It really is. Like, I just toilet flush from the whole thing. I don't know. Any last thoughts, Garrett, before we just probably never talk about this until Game of the Year?
I haven't played the Battle Golf, but I've seen gameplay videos of it, and that looks fun.
It's alright, yeah. I played a couple of games online. I think if I was in a room with people, maybe I would enjoy that more.
Because that does seem to at least have the chaos, and you can wreck people next to you, and you can steal their shot and get their hole. That at least does have some of like the interactive multiplayer bits, but I haven't actually played it, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's fun to play online.
And the one other big thing as well is that it's unbelievable how lacking this game is visually. It seems so lazy in like, you know, Nintendo have this thing where their games might not be visually the most complex, but they have an art direction they go with, and they do it unbelievable well. Like, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still probably one of the best looking games on Switch, and it's not because it's so like crazy out there in terms of its technical achievement. It nails its art direction, and everything on the screen looks unbelievable. And this is a Switch game 3-4 years later, and that also is obviously a port of the fucking Wii U game. But there's so much of this, like, there's so many assets in, and I was doing a stream of it a few days ago, and I was just walking around, like, the kind of, like, not central hub, but the kind of village you're in before you go on the golf course.
Yeah, which is all so pointless, by the way. Yeah. There's nothing you can do in any of that.
But, like, the golf buggy that you can see looks like it should be, you know, if you played, like, Tony Hawk's 3 or 4, and it's, you know, you got, like, a PS2 game, and you have a car that clearly is there to serve the purpose of you can hitch to the back of it, but they made it in, you know, an afternoon, and it's very kind of poorly formed, but it does the thing it needs to do, you know, mechanically and functionally.
Yeah.
Like, they look like that, but they're also not doing anything. They're just sitting there for no purpose whatsoever, and it's like, if you're going to make something that looks that bad, just don't fucking put it in there to begin with. You know, you've got like bundles of hay that have the same texture warping properties of an N64 material. You've got a shovel that I saw that, again, served no purpose and was standing upright, not even leaning it against anything. The water looks terrible and is like a low resolution to it and a low texture. There's so many things that just, if you take a look at it, you're like, that doesn't need to be there. That doesn't need to be there. If you absolutely need to have that there, that needs to look better than it is. I was stunned that a Nintendo game would have that kind of lack of quality control visually. And like, because you just don't see that.
Camelot generally make good-looking games, don't they?
Yeah.
Like, the tennis games were good-looking games. So what went wrong here? Even the Wii U one, Ultra Smash, which is like the lightest game you'll ever find in your life, content-wise, but it looks really good, as opposed to this, which it looks fine.
I prefer the way Toadstool Tour looks in this game, funnily enough. Yeah, I think that was our conclusion last week, is just go get Toadstool Tour. And if you can't get a GameCube and a copy of it, you know, I guess Dolphin or whatever is the emulator, until Nintendo release it on the Virtual Shop in like 2026.
But yeah, I think we'll leave it with Mario Golf, and I'm sure it will come up in the most disappointing category come the end of the year.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to say I'm campaigning for it to win or anything, but
No,
I think
but
in
it's
my
gonna be
head
in
at the
there.
moment, it might actually be winning for me.
I still have one, which would be Meat Boy Forever, because they took one of the best platformers ever and turned it into an auto runner. It's going to be difficult for me to argue against that, but this is definitely up there as well. All right, I'm going to go to Garrett first with Metroid Samus Returns. Now, is this the Game Boy game, or is this the remastered version of that?
This is the 3DS remake of Metroid 2. Which,
Right, 3DS remake. Cool, because I have played this one. So
yeah, I'm
okay,
one
the
of
floor is
those
yours.
scrubs who has never... I tried to play, I think, nearly every Metroid game. But I've only played like half an hour of it, and then like, all right, moving on. So
It's the thing with Metroidvanias. Like, if you don't get it after half an hour, you can't be bothered half an hour. There's no point playing it because
that's it. That's all you're going to
Yeah.
be doing for the next 8 hours.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Garrett, I would like to confirm that if you're a scrub, you're also known as a buster. So just that's a very important piece of information.
Like a bunny? Yeah. Or a Buster
Like a
Sword?
TLC song.
Or
Yeah. How are you not familiar with the works of TLC, my friend?
tables, ladders, and chairs?
Too busy chasing Warforce.
Actually, that's Full Metal Mayhem. Thank
Yes,
you very
thank you.
much.
Respecting the correct intellectual property. But yeah, of course, they announced Metroid Dread at E3 coming out this year. So I'm like, I am going to finish a Metroid game. I'm going to do it. I still haven't done it, but
Do you know what? Can I just say, first of all, if you was going to do that, Super Metroid would be the
Yeah,
one to
man.
fucking play.
yeah, but I have it on. I say that I literally have Super Metroid on like 5 different consoles at this stage,
Right. Well, fucking play on one of them then, because it is the best one.
including the 3DS on which I am playing Metroid Samus Returns.
Oh dear, you're offending the platforming prodigy over there.
Because I got to be honest, Samus Returns is not the best example of a 2D Metroid game, if I'm being perfectly honest.
And I agree with you.
Okay, well, that's, yeah.
I think Samus Returns is fun for like 2 hours.
Mhm.
And then you're like, oh wait, this is just all you do for the rest of the game.
Yep.
You're like, okay, I'm just gonna go kill some Metroids and go through the same areas, and not even like the power-up progression isn't great, because I feel like I think there's like 17 Metroids left for me at the moment. I'm in like the 4th area of the game, and like I think it's been like a good like 2 hours since I've gotten like a power-up that's made a meaningful difference to how I play the game, and I'm just doing the same thing over and over, and these Metroid fights aren't interesting enough to have 40 of them.
Oh man.
No, that game has a lot of padding in terms of its length, and like, because they're doing a remaster or a remake of a Game Boy game, so it's not going to follow kind of to a T. Like the Game Boy game, you can do in a couple of hours, if I remember, and obviously like. In some ways, it does a disservice because it's on the Game Boy. That original Samus 2 game is very claustrophobic because obviously how much you can present on the screen in one sitting, in one go. And that works in its favor, that it is kind of lost in translation in this remaster. But also just overall, like I, as a man who very much enjoys the Metroid games, I lost steam with that after a few hours for what you
Could you say you
mentioned
lost
there.
Mercury steam after a couple hours? Because
Potentially,
they make the
yes.
game and the steam is a pun.
I honestly, like, if you wanted to play a Metroid game, I genuinely would say play Super Metroid, because it is, for good reason, one of the better Metroidvanias out there, because, hey, the genre is in the title.
That Metroid game on GameCube slapped as well, by the way.
Oh, what, the Prime series?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 3D ones are excellent as well, but in terms of like a good 2D Metroid, please play Super Metroid, because it is a tight-knit 5 to 6 hour experience. There are multiple ways you can get through it. Not all the weapons are necessary, but it's fun to explore every kind of nook and cranny of that game. Yeah, I would. If you'd have told me beforehand you was planning to play 2D Metroid, I would have not suggested Samus
Sit down with the
Returns.
3DS and play Samus Returns. One thing I am worried about when I go back, if I go back, I'll definitely, because I'm intending to play through all of them, and I don't know why I started with Samus Returns, but I did. But the one thing I am worried about is the map on the lower screen on the 3DS is very useful. So I'm worried to go back to the old Metroid games where I have to open the map with the start button and the cumbersome process that will involve.
Well, if you want to avoid that, just play the original Metroid because it doesn't have a fucking
you
map.
can just struggle blindly through the darkness of whatever the name of the planet is in Metroid 1.
I never played the original Metroid until many, many years later. In fact, actually, that and Link to the Past, the original Legend of Zelda, Jesus. I didn't play those two games until many, many years later, and they're fucking impossible to play. And I don't know how like a 7-year-old child has sat down and completed those without any kind of walkthrough or guide, or literally drawn kind of map by map like each section of those games. Because without a map, like that original Metroid is a genuine maze in the worst way possible.
I feel like old games sort of made you more hardy. You know, and I don't want to be one of these get good people because I hate them so much. Really, just a pointless thing to say if somebody's not enjoying a game or it's too difficult for them. Like, what? Like, they don't either need to continue or there should be variations in difficulty. But like, when you played stuff like that when you were younger, like it really did sort of foster like a weird determination to get through certain sections, and like to the point where you were learning pretty much beat by beat, like almost speedrunner type, like I need to jump here and do this then and that. So that kind of really did train your brain, I think, for those sort of games. So I think even though you played it when you were older, Mark, that basis of video gaming from when you were younger was still in there, that you were able to finish it. I just think you like adapt to whatever scenario you're given as a child, and I think kids back then were just naturally more intuitive and knew that if they were going to play through a game, they had to put in the work themselves. If it's not at the end of a phone, or like, you know, there was a guidebook or something. Or I don't know if you agree with that.
To some degree, but I think as well that the problem with those older games is because, you know, we live in a world now where games are way more complex in their mechanics. You know, every hour or two you're getting some new MacGuffin that kind of like enhances the experience. Like even Super Metroid was doing that as well, whether it be the kind of hook shot or all these other extra things that, you know, you don't actually need, but they're there just to kind of differ up the strategy. But I think the bigger thing, and specifically with Metroid, is so much of that original Metroid just looks the fucking same. So it's impossible to kind of like differentiate one area from the next, where Super Metroid does an incredible job. Like all of the biomes are very, very distinctive. And that was my biggest issue with Carry On from last year, where it just did not clearly define the areas were different. And that game also didn't have a map. So like, every time a Metroidvania comes out and everyone goes, oh yeah, well obviously that's inspired by Metroid, I think Carry On is the biggest example of that because it carries the biggest flaws of that original Metroid, and probably by design.
Can we talk about the injustice of the name Metroidvania, by the way? It's a Metroid game. Metroid invented the format, Castlevania stole it, and then it gets credit.
They did, yes, they did, but I mean, Symphony of the Night kind of is... I actually think, and this is a hot take, but I think Symphony of the Night is a little bit overrated, and I actually think those Castlevania, Metroidvania games are a little bit overrated, because I think that the combat is a bit boring, and, you know, like... every time you go into a new area, just the enemies are there again, and like traversing around, I don't know. Symphony of the Night is fine, but I think the big thing with that is like, oh, you completed the game, now let's turn the castle upside down. Which is cool.
Lots of games invented a format, and then it was bettered by another game, and then that game becomes to represent it. Like the most recent example is like PUBG and Fortnite, for instance, right?
True, but like they're called battle royale games, you know, like Metroidvania is a genre.
Yeah, Metroidvania is a genre, but like I think when you think of battle royale, those names are the first thing that come into your head. But I think it's good that Castlevania gets a shout out in there, but I think in terms of like, Metroid gets a shout out in there, but I think in terms of maybe like the popular version of it probably was the Castlevania games that kind of stood the test of time. But people still get hyped for Metroid now, like as we saw, you know, when Nintendo advertised that they might be doing another one. Well, they are doing another one like a couple of weeks ago, but yeah.
And Castlevania's dead as well, so it's definitely just a Metroid game now.
It's true, but how many Castlevania-ass games have there been in the last few years on like Switch markets and stuff?
I think there's about 85 of them, and about 40 of them are on the Game Boy Advance and the DS.
Yeah.
And they're all weeb games and they're terrible.
I guess it comes from, like, you can't call it just a Metroid game because you're like, oh, Metroid Prime is a first-person shooter. So is it a first-person shooter or is it the 2D progressive adventure game, as I try to come up with different genre definition of?
True, but like those 3D Metroid games, I see them more as like big kind of puzzle box games more than like a first-person shooter. Like in terms of the master that it's serving, obviously it's a first-person shooter, but I think it still carries so much of the weight of those original Metroid games that I think it's more in line with that. But it's just, oh, by the way, it's now a first-person shooter instead.
They're more first-person versions of Tomb Raider, I guess. That's probably the thing that I would say it's most akin to. Or I don't know if you would agree with that.
To some degree.
Just because of the puzzle element.
Yeah, I mean, it also doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and people lose their fucking minds over this. But yeah, we'll move on. Garrett, you've also got here Monster Hunter Stories 2.
Yes, it's coming out next week, but they have a demo out in the eShop, which is a big, meaty demo. And I just wanted to give them credit, because like that demo is 4 hours long.
Wow.
Which is like a really good demo of a game. You can actually like, get a really good feel for whether or not you will enjoy this game. It's a turn-based RPG where you basically collect the monsters and use them to fight. It's a Monster Hunter Pokemon, basically. And it's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it a lot. I finished the demo and I bought the game. So clearly it won me over. But because the first one was on 3DS as well, but I didn't play it. So I was like, I'll give this demo a go, because this and the World Ends With You sequel demo were both released last week, I think. I was like,
so is this like just a JRPG offshoot of the Monster Hunter series then?
It's a turn-based RPG with Monster Hunter. Like they do have like loose mechanics, like you can switch between the weapons like you can in Monster Hunter, and you craft items, and as I said, you capture the monsters and use them to fight. And well, you don't capture them, you ride them and form bonds with them, or whatever the nice way of kidnapping monsters and forcing them to fight each other is that video games use.
But how does that work then? Like, does it follow the format of the actual Monster Hunter games then? But then the combat is turn-based? Like, how does it work actually in terms of capturing them?
Yeah, because there's these, like, central hub areas that you can use, like the Monster Hunter games have. But then you go out into these larger, like, exploration areas. And then in those areas, there are dens. And you go through the dens. At the end of the dens, there's monster nests where you steal eggs out of nests, which actually sounds very malicious, that you shouldn't do that, stealing monster eggs. But you
Hang on. Are you robbing mothers
Yes.
of their offspring to make them fight? That's even weirder than throwing a ball at Pokemon.
You are stealing the monster children eggs, hatching them yourself, and forcing them to be your slaves.
That is... Yeah, that's pretty fucked up, man. But we can put that to one side if you're still enjoying it, of course.
Yeah, it's a fun game, and it's surprisingly pretty. It's one of those, if you look really closely at it, it's like, they're doing their best to get around the Switch hardware. But they get away with it with, like, as Mark mentioned, with the Nintendo style of just good art design overcomes, like, hardware limitations. And it looks quite pretty. It is one of the games that breaks my, like, long-held rule of video games that every video game looks nicest at sunset, as opposed to this, which doesn't. I don't understand it. I didn't think it was possible to just put things in orange and it not be exceptionally good to look at, but apparently they can do it. But yeah, it's a turn-based RPG. I feel like I'm always playing RPGs whenever I'm coming on this show.
You seem to have that niche down when it comes to being on this show.
Yeah, I maybe just pass off my RPG crown to Garrett, I think. Did
you finish Bravely Default 2?
No, I actually haven't played it much since. I finished Fantasian, which is a very fun, enjoyable game. You should play Fantasian.
Yeah, so I think that's one you spoke about last time, if I recall.
I need to start that.
I finished Returnal since I've been on the show, which is probably my game of the year, but also I have lots of problems with. So welcome to 2021 in games.
I think I'm going to get that next, and I have one big question. How many hard crashes did you have with that?
Oh, 2? But they were both very deep into runs and deeply frustrating.
Right, because my concern is, because I don't know like if there's a link between them, but I had 2 hard crashes on Ratchet and Clank, and that was because I was using the fidelity setting. As soon as I turned it off and turned the ray tracing off, I didn't have any hard crashes again. I don't know if I play Returnal, I'm presuming it has kind of similar like visual settings to have ray tracing and 60 FPS or 30 FPS and smoother resolution. Does it? I should ask.
I didn't look into it. No idea.
Okay, right. But I'm concerned that my PS5 clearly is susceptible to hard crashes. And that's fine in a Ratchet & Clank game. I don't want to be dealing with that in a game like Returnal.
Yeah, especially in a game that expressly does not save, which is great fun.
Yeah, and surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, because they've clearly made it clear that they don't want to add, like, save points or checkpoints or that sort of thing. They seem to be sticking to their guns that that's the approach they're going to go with, which is annoying.
Yeah, and it is really annoying. And like the game would be better for it. And games have figured that out. That roguelikes, most other roguelikes let you save. You go into a new room and you save. There you could find some way to work it out, but they didn't. Or they
at least just don't hard crash.
Yeah, that's the thing. If your game didn't break all the time, it would be less of a problem. But yeah, as I said, it's probably my game of the year because there's a lot of things I like about it, but there's also it's one of those games that I really like, but there's 10 little holes I'd pick in it constantly. But yeah, it's a decent game.
I'm gonna get to it. Actually, my one question I want to ask, because I am a man who is a known coward. I know it's intense. Is it spooky or is it just intense?
No, there's no jump scare. Actually, I got scared once because an enemy snuck up on me, but even that it wasn't even designed to sneak up on you. It's just I didn't see it coming.
I will just constantly keep my finger on the trigger button and all will be grand in the world.
It's more of a bullet hell than anything else. It's literally just run, strafe, shoot.
I've watched very, very little footage of it because I want to kind of go in as blind as possible, but what I've seen is there's a lot of glowing orbs on the screen, and some of them coming in my direction and some are coming from the other direction. And it looks like something I'd quite enjoy. Jack, you are not a known coward now. You've completed Resident Evil 8. Resident Evil Village.
So I started it, and then Mario Golf distracted me, but it distracted me for
about 2 minutes.
For such a small amount of time that I got right back into Resident Evil, and this week I've hammered through it, to be honest. So I think much like any Resident Evil game, it kind of starts, and I always feel a little bit alienated with Resident Evil games initially because they're trying to shit you up and they're throwing you into a situation where it is about survival. And I think once you get past that initial point and you start getting a handle on the game mechanics and how this thing's going to play out, you're just in it from there on out. But yeah, Resident Evil 8 is really good, guys. Dave came on here and did a full recap of the story, so I'm not really going to add too much, but I will say one of the scariest things I've ever seen in video games, movies, TV is one of the sections in this game in which you are locked in the basement of a house, which is kind of filled with creepy doll parts and weird little dolls popping around and just limbs and stuff hanging everywhere of dolls and weird mechanical noises. And you are being pursued around bedrooms and corridors in this house by this twisted half slug, half baby in the dark, and it actually makes baby sounds like baby cries and baby noises, and it just chases after you. And it's so harrowing that I took a break after I finished that section just because I knew at that point that the baby couldn't hurt me anymore, and that's how scary that was. So yeah, Mark, as a known coward, I recommend that you probably don't play. If you're going to play Resident Evil 8 Village, just let Maria play that section for you and then pick it up afterwards.
I've actually watched the full gameplay. I've watched the full game because I know I'm not going to play it, but I know it's going to come off for Game of the Year, so I figured...
What did you think of that section? It's horrifying, isn't it?
I mean, even just watching it, I was like, this is a bit much for me.
Yeah, it's genuinely terrifying, but after that... it's so cool. It's where you've got the different mini bosses. There's 4 kind of mini bosses before you kind of had the big final boss face off at the end of the game. They all have, the sections are all very different. They're all a different type of horrible. The dollhouse thing is more about just genuinely trying to weird you out. The first one is obviously Lady Dimitrescu, which is kind of the most memed and sort of popular thing about the game. And that is a gothic, creepy mansion, which is just one of my favorite game environments I've seen in a long time. And then there's the next section of just sort of underwater like caves and, you know, broken kind of paths and boats and stuff, and like a weird, like disgusting, slovenly kind of half fish man that you actually end up feeling sorry for. And then the final section is like just balls out like Terminator zombies with like eye patches and arm drills and like a fucking guy with a propeller for a face in a like broken down sort of old rusted factory. And it's just that like the mixture of the different styles that you approach these elements in is really, really cool. And yeah, the story's just absolutely whack out, not bollocks crazy. There's like a half hour where you essentially take over as a military guy and just rip you away, and just everything that you've been doing delicately all the way through the game at that point just goes completely to the wayside, and you just annihilate everything with machine guns. Yeah, and it's like maybe 10-12 hours long, the main story of this game, which is just about perfect. None of it dragged. The pacing is very good, and the story is fucking balls out mental. And it felt. The only thing I will say, and I don't know, like maybe in my head I compared too many games to this, but it felt very Metal Gear Solid-y. Like there's even a bit where you have like a sort of weird. Crafted together machine gun turret-y type vehicle thing that you're facing off against another even bigger sort of mechanical boss, and I was like, fuck, this really feels like a Rex versus Ray fight from Metal Gear Solid.
I will say, even by Resident Evil standards, like the kind of general spectacle and story is real fucking dumb.
Yeah, I loved it though. I love how stupid it is.
But even like in fairness, you know, Resident Evil 4 isn't exactly winning any Oscar awards anytime soon. Like that's a real dumb game. And actually, some of the kind of level of absurdity with this, it does remind me a bit of Resident Evil 6, but it's now just been packaged into a game that, from what I can see and from what people say, is actually an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, it's really fun to play, and that's the key point, I would say.
Yeah, I obviously like Dave is a fan. You're a fan, friend of the show. Barry Ladd is going to be streaming that at some point, so I'll be interested to see what his takes are as well. But it does seem to be one of the more kind of popular games of the year.
Garrett, have you had hands on this or played much?
No, I've only played the 2 remake. That's the only Resident Evil game I played.
Oh right, yeah. Well, that is very good. So I would say if you enjoyed that, you would enjoy this as well.
I am one of those people who is averse to spooky things.
Yes, there are some
Garrett.
genuinely terrifying moments in this game, but it's also very gore laden as well. So like,
there's a lot of with like the hands being removed or fingers being removed, and a lot of that I'm not for, just not for me.
Yep, Homeboy gets his hand sliced right off at one point, and then sort of weirdly reattaches.
But the second game in the fucking row, by the way.
Yep. So, that is a thing that happens in the game. But yeah, you know what? I'd say the least scary part of the game, Garrett, is probably like the Lady Dimitrescu section in the mansion, which is just a cool, spooky, gothic whodunit style looking mansion. So I would recommend like watching that section of the game if, and it might entice you to play it possibly. But yes, Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil Village, very thumbs up game from me.
The last thing we got on the games list for this week is something that I picked up from the Game Pass. It's called The Wild at Heart, which has a very kind of cute, whimsical visual style to it. It's 2D, but it kind of works in a 3D plane to some degree. It is basically Pikmin, but with a kind of story that takes place in the forest, and there is like a kind of like an evil presence in the forest, and you have these creatures that you use to combat with against enemies. But it's interesting, like we've seen over the last sort of 10 years ago, where indie developers are taking concepts or ideas or genres that we see in the bigger titles, but applying either like more of a heart to it or just kind of a different take in terms of the story. Like you take the likes of a Celeste and what that does in terms of telling a story about anxiety and depression, but, you know, wrapping it in a platformer and doing it really well. And it's kind of a similar thing here with The Wild at Heart, where it takes the Pikmin mechanic, but it applies it to the story, and also like the kind of the the beginnings of the game, you're running away from home, and it kind of has flashbacks and dream sequences to kind of like further explore the relationship between you and your dad or stepdad. I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't say it does any of that to the degree or as well executed as the likes of a Celeste, but it's nice that it's doing it, and I don't think it kind of shoves it in your face. I think it does it quite tastefully, and it kind of flows, and it works. You have your little plant creatures, so you can have I think you start with up to like 10 or 15. They follow you around. You're doing stuff like there's a bridge that needs to be completed, so you might throw 6 of them over to the other side, and they pick up these branches to build the bridge, and then there'll be another stack of branches somewhere else that you need to get to cross over the bridge to progress further. You have different types of enemies, and you have different types of little creatures. So I don't know how many there are, but so far I've got like your kind of generic creatures. I have like fire creatures, so obviously they deal with any obstacles that are on fire, so they'll clear them. There's like bushweed that needs to be burned, so you throw them into that and they'll clear that. Anything that you have seen in a Pikmin game is in this game, but it's just done with the visual style and the kind of more whimsical nature that this game is going for. I want to say about 4 or 5 hours in. I don't know how long this game is, but it's doing the kind of Zelda thing where it's like, here are 3 things that you need to go and do or pick up, your 3 MacGuffins. Once you've done this, here is like the rest of the game now that you need to go and do these things. There's nothing I would say is particularly challenging about it. It does do the same thing as Pikmin, where there's a day and night cycle, so you do whatever you need to do during the day. There's about like a 10-minute window to work with, and then as evening comes, you need to get back to like the campfire. Otherwise, these evil forces will come out and kill you and all of your little creatures, so you need to get back before them. So it does kind of keep you on your toes to make sure, like, okay, where is the nearest campsite? Can I get back in time before night comes? Which, like, it gives at least a little bit of challenge there where the game wouldn't have otherwise. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's always good to have these types of things on Game Pass that I probably wouldn't get to otherwise. And I'm giving it a thumbs up. If you like Pikmin, you'll probably like this.
All right, cool. If it's on Game Pass, I might check it out this week.
Perfect if you have the little Series S, I will say.
Yeah, I'm enjoying my Series S, even if I am using it as a Peggle machine a little bit at the moment.
Oh, and I downloaded Forza Horizon 4, and yeah, that game's really fucking good.
Oh god, it looks incredible, doesn't it?
It is ridiculous how good that looks even on a Series S.
Yep.
So, yeah, that is it from me in terms of what we've played. And I have just 2 stories this week, but one of them is particularly unpleasant, and the other one is actually quite interesting. But
before you get to the stories, can I just say that yesterday was Bidoof Day?
Oh, what a day!
Yesterday was Bidoof.
I bought the Bidoof T-shirt.
Yep, there you go. And as a noted Bidoof fan, Garrett Kidney, I just like you to put over the fact that Pokemon are celebrating Bidoof to this degree.
There was a quiz on the Pokemon website where there was just a series of questions to which all of the answers were Bidoof. So it's just like, what's a normal type Pokemon with large teeth? It's Bidoof. It's like, and then one of the questions was just like, Bidoof, ? To which the answer was Bidoof. There was also a Bidoof Rickroll, which was like the best thing in the history of like the internet.
Yes, I did watch that. That was very good.
And
amazing.
Of course, a series of Bidoof merchandise, of which I bought some.
Garrett, I mean, if you're not taking a picture of you wearing that T-shirt the second it gets through the door and putting on Twitter, I might put you on notifications for me just so I can be the first one to officially like it, because I'm so excited for you right now.
And if you remember my last appearance on the podcast, I was talking about taking pictures of Bidoof's rear end, so I think I made Bidoof Day happen.
Yeah, I think you possibly popularized Bidoof because, originally when I played Pokemon, and I think it's a Generation 4 Bidoof.
Yep.
They all kind of merge into one for me now. I think, like, I was like, oh god, Bidoof, like, on that early part of the game, whereas, once you have the time and distance separated from that, you can look at these things like, what, Bidoof actually, pretty fun Pokemon. Yeah.
Well, there's one of those for every generation. You got your Zigzagoons,
your Rattatas.
Your Rattatas, obviously.
Your Sentries.
Rattata.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's some sort of like small woodland creature.
Yeah.
Usually.
I want to say Yamper for Generation 8 though.
No, because he's an electric type.
No, yeah, but he turns up at the start of the game.
The squirrel with the cheeks. That's the Bidoof.
Yeah.
The little kind of ferret. No, wait. What does the Bidoof? The Bidoof does evolve into something, doesn't it?
Bibarel, yeah, which is basically just which they normally like change them significantly, but Bibarel just looks like a slightly bigger Bidoof with a big old tail that it uses to whack stuff. Which I'm on board for that. Like the transformation is really not changed; it still has the cute ass face. So yeah,
it's like, why would you ever want to evolve a Rowlet? You know, it's like, it's perfect. It's an owl with a bow tie.
Yeah,
you don't want to evolve it past that.
And it's a perfect sphere as well. Like it moves by rolling around. Mark, there is a GIF.
He's a round boy.
There's a GIF of Rowlet that just rolls around something, and I've watched it on loop for at least 15 minutes before, and I was happy for every single second of it. Anyway, news.
Anyway, so yeah, Bidoof Day. Shifting gears, somewhat fierce to say the least. So you may remember Chris Avellone was cut. He was cut from some places last year. Most notable was Techland, the developer of Dying Light 2, after he was accused by Carissa Barrows of getting her drunk and groping and forcing himself onto her. Since then, he has applied a slap lawsuit against over 100 people that have accused him of sexual misconduct. And not the best thing about this, but one of the kind of more interesting things about this. So he's, doing this on the basis that he has a loss of employment and there's reputational harm, which, yes, I would say that his reputation has been harmed by this. I think we're at least in agreement on that.
He harmed his own reputation by being such a creep.
Yeah, but he is saying that all of these allegations are deeply untrue. The problem is that so lawyers are currently discussing the SLAP, which is called a strategic lawsuit against public participation, on Twitter. These are generally used by plaintiffs to silence people by bullying them with the threat of bankruptcy, though Avellone claims he started the lawsuit because he wants accusers to speak up more. Okay,
you're going to need to explain his logic behind that one.
Nope, I ain't going to do it. I'm not getting anywhere fucking near that one. I'll leave him to try and dig out of that hole himself.
Him and Joey Ryan, best mates by the sounds of things.
According to DM Schmeier, an attorney at law for Cusk Law, it's notoriously difficult to push through a slap suit in California, the state where the lawsuit has been actioned. California law dictates that complaints can be struck down within 60 days of being filed, forcing the person who filed the suit to foot the bill for attorney and court fees. The person served with the slap suit can also file a countersuit for compensatory damages and abuse of legal process. Another thing that will make this difficult is that Avellone is a public figure. His own filing lays this status out in black and white under the general allegations section, which highlights his prominent career in game development. Public figures must prove malice through clear and convincing evidence to win a slap suit. Providing proof that the person knew the statements they made were false, whether done out of malice or ignorance doesn't matter, they are untrue. That's what Avellone said in his tweet about the lawsuit, and lawyers seem to disagree. So basically, I think he's kind of fucked himself over with this.
Yeah. I can't see this helping him in any way. I can't see this repairing his public reputation. I can't see any publishers jumping on to work with him again anytime soon. If anything, all it's done is recycled this back into the news. A lot of the times I often think that, like, when people properly rage against something like this, sometimes you would think from their shitty perspective the best thing for it to happen is to just let it drop out of the news cycle. So it's a spectacular self-own, I would say, putting this lawsuit up against everybody that's accused him. It's like, yeah, mate, now everybody remembers that you're a creep. So, oh well, fuck this guy, I guess, is my take. What do you think, Garrett?
The first line of this news story, in a Medium blog post tagged under cancel culture, game writer Chris Avellone has spoken up for the first. Get fucked. Just get fucked.
God, cancel culture.
Maybe he can go work for XPW.
Oh yeah, with fake Marty Skrull.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe him and I don't know. I feel like David Cage might hire him. Why not?
Oh yeah, maybe there'll be like some. Well, I guess Quantum Dreams is a bit of an edgelord studio.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
He can appear on what's his name's podcast from Kind of Funny.
Oh god. You got like Colin Moriarty.
That's
Does
it,
he have a
Moriarty.
podcast? Yeah.
Yeah.
God, it probably will happen. It probably will happen.
Oh, it almost certainly will happen that it will end up appearing on Moriarty's podcast.
Somehow he may even end up on Rogan's podcast. Who the fuck knows?
Oh god,
Such is the world we live in.
Yeah. Before I knew Joe Rogan had a podcast, I quite liked Joe Rogan as a UFC commentator. And that really funny riff that he did in the Dave Chappelle show on Fear Factor. And then I heard all of his opinions and I was like, oh no. Let's move on to the next news story.
Yeah, and proceeded to have Alex Jones on his podcast on multiple occasions.
Multiple occasions, oh god damn.
Yeah. Slightly more interesting news. Rockstar co-founder Dan Houser has formed a new studio following his departure from the Grand Theft Auto maker from last year. As spotted by users on GTA forums and French publication Rockstar Mag. Last week, Houser registered a new UK company called Absurd Ventures in Games, rolls off the tongue, which was officially incorporated on June the 23rd. According to its listings on Companies House, the UK's Register of Companies, Absurd Ventures in Games, Nature of Business is listed as a ready-made interactive leisure and entertainment software development, suggesting the company could be another studio. Houser is named as the director of the UK company, but no other staff have been associated with it yet, although the company's registered office is in Cheshire, but it doesn't mean that it'll actually be based there. Its registered office is that of Oakwood Corporate Services, which provides secretarial duties for over 1,000 companies. So, parent company Take-Two announced in February 2020 that Houser was set to leave Rockstar on March 11th, 2020, following an extended break beginning in the spring of 2019. And obviously, Dan Houser was a key figure behind some of their most successful titles in the GTA series, the Red Dead Redemption series, Bully, and Max Payne 3. And him and his brother were named in the Times Magazine's 100 most influential people list, which, when you think of game developers, and certainly when you think of like those kind of auteur game developers, obviously you go straight to
Kojima.
You go to, yeah, exactly. But I do think that the Houser brothers are in that list as well, but they're just not as, as present in the kind of physical sphere. You don't see as much of them.
Yeah, you wouldn't, like, if a Houser brother walked past you, especially not Dan Houser, you probably wouldn't notice. And I've got to say, for a start, he should have called his studio Dan Housery, like shit Housery. Like, that would have just, it's right there. Why are you not doing that?
But, what do we think about this then? I mean, you can say a lot about the kind of fatigue of Grand Theft Auto, and that would be fair. But, it is inarguable that those games are massively influential, and it would at least be interesting to see what Dan would go off and do by himself, or want to do, at least anyway, or try to do.
It's interesting that you say that we have Grand Theft Auto fatigue when there hasn't been a new Grand Theft Auto game in nearly a decade.
I know, it's insane, but fucking GTA 5.
It's just so annoyingly pervasive that...
Exactly.
I don't know.
No one's built a game environment like that since, though. Like, it really is fucking good, you have to say.
Yeah, you would wonder what's going on at Rockstar, that, if he jumped ship...
They're counting all the money they've been making?
Well, yes, but, the fact that he jumped ship and would perhaps start a new company all his own... Perhaps there are suggestions that maybe his creative vision is being stifled there, or they're trying to move things in a different direction.
I think there just is no creative vision to do anything because they're just not making new games anymore. GTA 5 is one of the world's biggest piggy banks, and it just keeps wringing money into it on a minute-to-minute basis. So he's probably like, let's make GTA 6, and they're probably like, nah, we're still making loads of money on this. And he's like got frustrated and he's like, fuck it. Like, I think genuinely, if you're a creative person and your creations have spawned such bountiful things for like lots of people earning money off of all of his creations, that it gets to the point where maybe you're just like, everyone's happy to just carry on milking this And he's like, well, I want to do something different. And if he can't do that different thing under the umbrella of Rockstar anymore, then maybe he's using this as a creative outlet to do something completely different. You know, it's the sort of equivalent of like a famous author using a pseudonym, maybe going off and making another thing somewhere else. So, yeah, fair play to him. I hope that he does want to make games, because I've greatly enjoyed pretty much all of the output of Dan Houser over the years. So yeah, we'll see what he does with this new studio. Hopefully something interesting comes out of it.
The thing that's interesting as well is because part of the reason that studios can be a bit hesitant to do something new is if the thing that you're making is still very successful and making a lot of money, you don't want to go make a new thing, which then fractures or splinters the player base. But GTA Online, as far as I'm aware, is its own separate thing at this point. You don't need GTA 5 to play GTA Online.
Can I just point out that they bought out Red Dead Redemption 2, and GTA 5 is stronger than ever, isn't it?
That is also true, yeah. So it could just be a case that they just have no idea what the fuck to do next, which is kind of understandable, because you made the sequel to Red Dead Redemption, which was 10 years in the making. Even actually, yeah, about 10 years in the making. And GTA 5, sure, you could make another GTA game, but the question that kind of comes is well, what the fuck do you do next? Because you really have done everything you can do with that space. So I think the only golden carrot, or the only kind of thing left that people really would like, is a new Bully game. But I think a Bully, even as kind of much as you hear people talk about it, I still think it's way more kind of niche than a GTA or a Red Dead. So it's well, where the fuck are they going to go next?
Clearly, he was I want to make Rockstar Games Presents Table Tennis 2. And they're no, that's too much of a risk. We can't let you do that.
Yeah.
Naturally, that is, the only other kind of direction to go.
That game was great, by the way.
Maybe it is. It might just be as simple as hey, you want to make GTA 6? And he's not really.
Yeah.
Which I think is fair enough. You probably do get to a point where you're I'm kind of done with these games now. That's
what I mean. Hence the pseudonym thing. Go off and do something else. What if he's my next game is an action-adventure RPG game where you play a lion called Steve? Who knows? That's what he might really want to do that. And then Rockstar are well, this is not really tonally us. And he's right, stop stifling my vision, and walking out of there like Mugatu from Zoolander and shit. So why not? And if he does make an RPG lion game, Garrett Kidney will be back on the show to discuss how he levels up his lion.
Yeah. How does it compare to the other RPG lion games like Kingdom Hearts, where you can have Simba in your team?
That's true. That's a good scramble. Well done.
I'm just now thinking. We were talking, so on the Link to the Cast Twitter account the other day, we posted about, it was the anniversary of Disney's Hercules. Hercules! And the kind of notorious difficulty of 90s Disney platformers. And I've now just been reminded, as we talk about lions, about The Lion King, which is a fucking brutally difficult game.
It's a mean game.
It is! It is a mean game. But what is such a joyful experience? Well, I say joyful, obviously,
I only ever played it when it was released with the Aladdin ones, a couple of years ago, which it had rewinds, which made it playable. But even then, I'm this is still just a mean game.
There you go. All about the lions.
But that is it for this week's edition of Link to the Cast. Speaking of Disney, Garrett, you may have a podcast talking about Disney.
Oh, I have so many podcasts.
You do. You know what? Here's your moment. We have a few minutes to kill. Go through them all.
So if you would like to hear me talk about Disney, in which you can hear me talk about The Lion King, you can listen to Magic by Design, my podcast with my brother, where we talk about every single Disney animated feature. And we've actually gone through all of them now. We've moved on to Pixar. So we spun off the original concept and moved on to Pixar. So we just did Toy Story, but we're doing A Bug's Life this weekend. So if you'd like that, go to magicbydesign.buzzsprout.com or search Magic by Design in your favorite podcast providers. If you would like a podcast about the history of TNA wrestling, boy, do I have the one for you. You can listen to You've Got to Be Kidding Me, a podcast about the history of TNA. We only launched it 2 weeks ago, so one episode is up. But actually, by the time this episode goes up, 2 episodes of it will be up. So we've talked about June 2002 and July 2002. Just search You've Got to Be Kidding Me on your favorite podcasting platform. You can go back and listen to my old podcasts if you want, like Podcast a Week, or I did a podcast every week, novel concept. Podcast a Day, which was the precursor to Podcast a Week, which was where the Podcast a Week name came from, in which I did a daily podcast for 200 days, and it's some of the worst content you'll ever hear in your life. I can keep going. There's the Weekend Show that me and my brother did. Same brother with the Disney podcast, but now we spun off into Disney. But we talked about like current events and stuff that lasted a while. There was also the Wednesday War Games podcast about the wrestling Wednesday Night War, but the Wednesday Night War ended, so did the podcast. I think that's it. I think that's only the history of my 7 podcasts no one has ever listened to.
Wow, I mean, that is a lot of Garrett Kidney content.
There's
out there
so much of it that nobody wants.
In fairness, Jack, we between us have a few podcasts, some failed podcasts through the years.
A storied podcast history for me, and you as well, and then a few that I've done spun off with Dave that haven't done anything. Not a couple of podcasts at the moment, so yeah, it's just I don't think I've got as many as Garrett in the bag though. That's pretty crazy. But I will put over Garrett's Disney podcast. I've listened to a couple episodes and I do really enjoy it. So there you go.
Heck yeah.
But this is linked to the cast.
I also feel like I need to point out that Red from Final Fantasy VII is pretty much a lion, and I would be very angry with myself if I didn't point this out as a lion in an RPG.
Squall from Final Fantasy VIII is also a lion. Maybe
School Lionheart. Yeah,
there's the sound one of his audio as opposed to visual songs. It's called "Maybe I'm a Lion," so that's one of the tracks. So there you go.
Yep. Name of Squall's lion on all of his insignia. Do you know that?
Oh God! Oh no! Oh, it's gone out of my head.
It's Griever.
Griever. Ah.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm very upset with myself.
Before you two drag this into another Final Fantasy VIII recap, I am bringing this fucking thing to a halt. You can follow us on Twitter at linktothecast. You can send us an email over at linktothecast@gmail.com. As always on the tweet machines, Jack is at Jack Lazel. I am at Mark Robinson. Dave should be back next week if he has survived his trip up the mountains. He is at Dave Today, or Day to Dave. I can never remember. It's one of the two.
Day to Dave.
Doesn't matter. Day to Dave. There we go. And we will see you next week. We're off to go and watch Belgium and the Azuri. Get at it.
Hakuna Matata.